Welcome home, where we provide information, inspiration, and motivator after motivator after motivator here on America's Next. I have Jane Elliott here with me today. And if you're tuning in tonight, I want you to stay for the first and second half of the show. I got a little bit of water here, and I'm going to take a sip because this is going to be a powerful conversation. So let me get that out the way. I want you to tag, text, and get somebody else in the building for our discussion tonight, because it's an important one. I want you here. I need you here. Don't leave. Stay for the gravity. Stay for the difficult realities that are going to come out of this conversation tonight. And let's all walk away better people with a clearer perspective of the human race. Jane Elliott, where are you from?
I'm from Riceville, Iowa. I was born and raised in Riceville, Iowa, on the farm that my great-great-grandfather was one of the founders of.
Your great-great-grandfather was one of the founders of the town that you grew up in?
One of the first people that lived in that town, yes.
Wow. Was that a family history that was told orally, that was passed down from generation to generation?
Well, my father didn't want to pass it down when we went to school. He'd say to us before we went to school, now, when the teacher asks you what your nationality is, you tell them you're blue-blooded Yankees. They don't have to know any more than that, because my father was part Irish and so was my mother. And at that time, it wasn't a good idea to be Irish. There were signs up that said, no Irish need apply. So my father was very careful at that time not to talk about his Irish background.
So you would just let it be known that you were, say that again?
Blue-blooded Yankees. Nobody has to know anything else about you. They don't have to know where you came from. You're blue-bellied Yankees. That's all we ever were.
A blue-bellied Yankee.
Right. That's what we were. Eight of my maternal grandparents, no, 8 of my antecedents on my grandmother's side, my paternal grandmother's side, fought in the Revolutionary War. That's how blue-blooded we were, blue-bellied we were. We went back a long way.
Wow. So you had a legendary family, if you will. Legends were told about your grandmothers, your grandfathers, and their participation in the formation of what we call America today.
Well, no, mostly in my family, we're just called revolting. We were revolutionaries, there's no doubt about it. But by the time it got to my generation, we were just revolting, and we've revolted constantly. We weren't good about maintaining order or listening to older people's advice if it didn't make any sense. And a lot of it didn't make any sense.
What were you all revolting against?
Mostly we were revolting against the fact that my mother was a casual Catholic and my father was a believing Baptist. So both sides of the family sort of wanted to disown us, and my mother's family did try to disown us because obviously all 7 of us were called, and you'll pardon this expression, but it's what they called us, the dirty little bastards, because my mother had married out of the church. So obviously none of us was really, we're not the product of a real marriage, because this could not happen at that time. It did, and here I still am.
How many siblings do you have?
I had 6. One died at the age of 3, broke my father's heart. She was his favorite child. And I can remember the day she died. I'll never forget it as long as I live, and neither did he.
Mm-hmm. What was elementary school and middle school and high school like for you? Was it just a blur? Was it all a blur?
Oh my, no, I remember practically every minute of it, because from K through 8, I went to the school that was on the corner of my father's farm. And my great-grandfather had to give an acre of his land for a school on which a school would be built. And it was. And all 6 of my siblings and I, well, 5 of them because Owen died, but the other 6 of us all graduated from that one-room schoolhouse. So that I remember school very, very well, because I was the only one in my grade. When I went into kindergarten, there was another girl in the grade. Her name was Lois Warburton. And she didn't show up after a couple of weeks. And I didn't understand that, never particularly cared. I was having fun. I found out 2 years ago when I talked to that one, a grown woman, she said, I was supposed to be in your grade, but the teacher told my dad that I'd never keep up with you. They should keep me home a year. So I got to stay home a year, and you had to keep on going to school. So she was a year behind me, but should have been in my grade. But I was the only one in my grade for many years. So I remembered by the time I had gotten to sixth grade, I knew all the seventh and eighth grade program because I'd heard it for all those years. It was an interesting way to learn.
Talk to me about the climate of education during those years? Was it common for people to go to what looked kind of like a private school and you're on your own father's land? Was that a common thing, or was that
Oh,
special?
no, that wasn't a private school. That was a rural school.
Yeah.
At that time, farmers' kids went to a school in the neighborhood, and there had to be in every area there had to be one farmer who gave up an acre of land on which to build a school. My father went to that school. My aunts and uncles went to that school on my father's side, because we lived in the farm, and you couldn't get to town. But we would have to travel 4.5 miles to get to school. There were no buses when I was a kid. So my father would have had to drive us into school. So we went to school, and so did all the neighbors' kids go to school in Round Grove too, in Jamestown Township. But they called it the Jennison School because after my brother got into school, then every year there'd be some more. At one time, there were 5 Jennisons all going to that school. So they called it the Jennison School, and nobody wanted to teach in that school because we were hard to teach.
And who was doing the teaching? Who were the teachers?
Oh my God, whoever had graduated from high school and had gotten a normal training course in how to teach, and they came in to teach for practically no money at all. And they had to build the fire in a stove in the morning in order to heat the place. The toilets were in 2 little buildings outside the school building, out on the back of the building. To teach in a one-room school, you had to be really tough and really quick and really creative. And some of them were and did an extremely good job. Some of them weren't and did a terrible job and did get hired back. But some of them were excellent. But the advantage was when you got into kindergarten, you started hearing the first, second, third, fourth, fifth grade, sixth, and seventh, and eighth grade programs. For that whole year, you heard all those programs. So by the time you got into sixth grade, you knew all the seventh and eighth grade program because you'd heard it so often. It was amazing. The people who taught in those schools had a lot of courage and a lot of ambition and a lot of ability to deal with kindergartners, 5-year-olds, and 14-year-olds in the same room, boys and girls, adolescent boys and kindergarten kids. And imagine that in a room that would hold 24 to 26 students, and a teacher trying to control all those urges, especially in those adolescents. It must have been a real challenge, and many of them were up to it. It was remarkable.
In that almost small environment, it's not a small environment, we know, but it looks like a centralized environment where you're looking at the teacher, you're hearing the other lessons going on, you hear the 7th graders and the 8th graders. That small nuclear type of environment, is that what compelled you to want to be a teacher yourself?
I didn't want to be a teacher. I wanted to be a nurse. But my father said, if you're going to take nurses training, I won't help you. You want to be a teacher, I'll help you. So I needed the help. So I decided to become a teacher, and that's what I did. And my aunt, his sister, said, if you'll be a teacher, you can live at my house in Waterloo, Iowa, and ride the bus back and forth to Cedar Falls every morning and for the first summer, so that the first quarter of school of your college won't cost you anything for room and board. All you have to do is pay for the bus fare to ride back and forth to Cedar Falls. So that's what I did. I lived with her for a summer, and her house was on the edge of the black section. I walked from her house to the bus station every morning, past much of the black section, and was never frightened, was never concerned, just walked on by. Had no problem, never had a problem. But that was in 1952, the summer of 1952. That was before the civil rights movement started. It was amazing.
Before the civil rights movement started, you saw with your own eyes that there was not as much tension between white people and black people. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But the tension was there, but it wasn't as obvious. That it was always there. Because you know as well as I do, Blanche wouldn't even say, be careful. She would just say, mind your own business and go to school. You'll be fine. And I wasn't. That was not a problem. But at that time, people who were what we insist on calling black, and they aren't, people who are white, we insist on calling white, and they aren't, hadn't decided yet that it was time to put a stop to this nonsense. In fact, most melanemic people, which is what I say instead of white, most melanemic people didn't see the problem because they were comfortable with it. Most melanemic people today only see the fact that melanaceous people want it to end. That's the problem as far as they're concerned. They still don't see that treating people positively or negatively because you are convinced that they are members of a different race, they don't see that as a problem because they still aren't smart enough. Well, they're smart enough, and they aren't stupid. You can't fix stupid. You can fix ignorant. And the problem we've got in this country today, the biggest problem we have is not racism, it is ignorance. We need to have educators educated. I'm an educator. The word educator comes from the word duc dus, which means lead, the prefix e, which means out, the suffix ate, which means the act of, and the suffix or, which means one who does. An educator is one who is engaged in the act of leading people out of ignorance. And if we had been doing that for the last 200 years, we would not have racism in this country today because we'd know that there's only one race, that you and I belong to the same race, and that's the human race. We are both Homo sapiens. That's it. But when you say Homo sapiens to some people in this country, they think you're saying homosexual. I'm not. I say we are both Homo sapiens. We are both members of that race. We are my ancestors looked like your ancestors, but my recent ancestors moved farther and farther from the equator, so are their skin, their hair, and their eyes got lighter. That's the only reason you have darker skin than mine, and that's the only reason you have darker hair than mine. My hair used to be almost as dark as yours, but age has something to do with that too, you know? Well,
Yeah.
you won't have that problem. But we need to realize that we are all members of the same race. There is only one race of human beings on the face of the earth. And that's the human race. We've got to say that over and over and over. Nobody taught me that when I was in school, K through 12, nor when I went to college. Nobody taught me that then. They didn't teach me that when I was working on a bachelor's degree. They still aren't teaching that there's only one race. It is time for us to come out of the dark ages. And it wasn't even in the dark ages. All this whole thing only started during the Spanish Inquisition, when Torquemada and company were trying to turn everybody Catholic, and if you weren't Catholic, they killed you. Well, they had killed a bunch of Christians before they realized that they were killing Christians, and then they realized you couldn't tell what someone's religion was by looking at them, so they decided they had to find a way to decide who probably wasn't Christian, and they set upon skin color, and they named part of us white and part of them black. Now, if you look in the dictionary, white means pure and good. Black means savagery and evil. So here we are. We are now set upon. We are on we have created a chasm between us. Good people, white. Bad people, black. It makes no sense. You aren't black, and I'm not white. We are both shades of brown, and it's time to stop using the words white, black. Words are the most powerful weapon devised by humankind. We kill people using words all day, every day. It's time for us to stop using those polar opposites to describe you and me. This makes no sense. It never did make any sense, except that now we have done it for so long in this country and worldwide. And if you haven't read the book, Rich Thanks to Racism by Jim Freeman, you better get it and read it. It will make you just furious. I am so angry after reading 2/3 of this book. You know, I could start a revolt tomorrow. Think we need a revolution, quite frankly, until we get the people in the business roundtable convinced that you don't have the right to make millions, billions, and trillions of dollars off the myth of race. It's not a myth. It's a lie. A myth is something we make up to explain something in nature that we don't understand. The Greeks had a myth that said that the sun was a god going across the sky in a golden chariot every morning. That's a myth. A lie is something you make up to get away with doing something totally unacceptable. That's what the idea of race is. It is a lie perpetuated in order to put some people in positions of power and other people to be turned into the people who are going to do the work to keep those people in power in positions of power.
That's right.
Racism is the single most money-making enterprise in the United States of America. And if you don't believe me, you ask the people who own the Walmart stores. They know exactly what they're doing, and they know exactly what they have to do to perpetuate their ability to make money. Read the book, The System, by Robert Reich. Read the book, The System, and then read Rich, Thanks to Racism. And you'll be, I know you're angry, but I am absolutely furious. I'm twice as old as you are, and I am absolutely furious that this is still going on.
In the first half of this show, everyone, we can say black or white as a way of being descriptive, but we are correcting those terminologies in this conversation. And so for right now, I want you all to know that when we use these terms, white or black, that's just for right now for descriptive purposes. But as we get further into this conversation, just like Jane said, we are going to eradicate the validity of colorism, of you're white and I'm black. We're going to eradicate that inside of this episode. Right now, I want to know, Jane, did you have a sense of entitlement when you were younger? Did you ever feel like I am white and other people are black and my life is different from black people's lives? Did you ever feel that way?
No, our whole neighborhood, our school, our community were all what we call white. And I never felt a sense of entitlement because I was raised in poverty. We had no money. We had 7 children on Hardscrabble Farm in northeast Iowa, and my dad worked as hard as he could to support that family. And my dad would say, and he was right, a woman can throw out more with a tablespoon than a man can bring home in a bushel basket. And he was right. He was very, you know, women like that, and my mother was like that. But anyway, we had no money. That's all there was to it. And so we learned to sing because we did have a radio, and if we could afford the battery, we didn't have electricity until I was 11 years old, 10 years old. Didn't have electricity. The REA hadn't brought electricity into rural communities at that time. So until I was 10 years old, we had kerosene lamps, and we had a wooden coal range and a wooden coal heater. And my dad had to find the wood to put into that heater to heat that house. So it was the way we lived, I realize now, was really tough. As far as we were concerned, we were living not as well as the rest of the neighbors were, but as well as my father could possibly make it possible for us to stay alive. And Anne died, so he wasn't entirely successful with that. And it changed his life tremendously because he felt like such a failure. He didn't fail. It wasn't his fault. We had a country doctor who didn't know what he was doing. And if he had known what he was doing, she'd still be alive.
Although your actual experience could never be just like mine, you have been through some adversities. Your early life was not easy. Just like life is not easy for hundreds of thousands of youth in the foster care system today. Just like life is not easy for young children growing up in the ghettos clear across America today. And so we can relate from that standpoint. But I want to know, at what point did you realize that we lived in a world that was into colorism, that was into the idea that some of us are white and white means better, and some of us are black and black means worse? When was your eyes open to that reality in America?
It wasn't open until I realized that I had been spoon-fed racism by my education. And I didn't realize that until I went to college. And I saw students of color who were smarter than I was, who were certainly better dressed than I was, who had more money than I had, who had more experiences than I had, and were going to do better at going to college than I was because it was absolutely essential that they do that. And they felt grateful to be there. I didn't feel grateful. I felt that I was being abused because I wanted to be in nurse's training. And here I was. So I graduated from high school in the end of May and started at Iowa State Teachers College the next week because I went right from high school straight to college. Mm-hmm. So I saw all these brilliant people of color, and I thought, I've been lied to, drastically lied to. These people aren't the way they have been described for me in the Uncle Rebus business and in Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. These were not people who were less than. They were people who were more than and who knew more than I did. And I became extremely resentful at the fact that I had been not educated, but indoctrinated. What we have going in this country today is a system of indoctrination. We don't lead people out of ignorance in the K through 12 schools in this country. We indoctrinate them into how to be a good American citizen. Now, we call this country, and here's one of the examples of our ignorance. We call the United States of America, America. America is everything from the northernmost point of Canada to the southernmost point of South America. North America, Central America, South America. All the people who live in all those countries are Americans. We are not. We, in the 48 contiguous states, Alaska, Hawaii, and the islands off the southeastern coast of the United States, are not the only Americans. But we are so arrogant and so ignorant that we will continue to call ourselves American, and we will continue to have presidents, but this one hasn't done it yet, who stand up and give their speech and then say, God bless you and God bless America. No, they need to say, God bless the United States of America. The most important part of that title is the word united, because we have had 4 years of a leader who tried to divide us. We have to accent the word united. We have to start calling this U.S. America, because U.S. spells us.
That's right.
And this is about us. This is about the United States, and we have to work very hard to see to it that we don't become the divided states of America. We could very easily have become 50 countries because of the behaviors of a really ignorant leader in the last 4 years.
When you talked about your frustration in realizing that you had been spoon-fed either racism or colorism or improper facts while you were in school, I think that you relate to so many thousands or millions of people across America. I personally
across where?
Across America, the Americans.
Across where?
The United States.
Thank you very much.
I was also frustrated to discover that the truth was different from what I thought were facts that I learned along the way. See, when I was in social studies and I learned about slavery, and when I was in reading arts and I read Tom Sawyer, I was under the impression that the extent of my history was slavery in America, which we were emerging out of. And so I had everything to gain. I had everything to be grateful for. I had everything to overcome. But as I got older, and my search started with meditation. I looked up meditation one day, and somehow it led down this rabbit hole of the excellence of melanated people because of their capacity to ascend into the ethers of the universe. And so being Black, contrary to what I had learned, was one of the most awesome things that you can be. And when I say Black, I mean melanated instead of melanin deficient. It was one of the most awesome things that you could be, because it allows you to ascend, rise, achieve a certain clairvoyance, a certain sensation of life. And so I was frustrated that I didn't learn about my own greatness in school. I was frustrated to learn that the nobility and the royalty, the civilizers of so many societies around the world looked like me. And so I shared your frustration when I got to college as well. And if you out there, whether you be on Roku TV, Apple TV, Android TV, Facebook, YouTube, Amazon Fire, if you understand the frustration that we're talking about right now, when you notice the difference between what you learned in school and what the actual truth is, I want you to put a 1 in the chat. Drop a 1 in the chat if you can identify with the frustration of realizing the difference between what you're learning in school and what the actual truth is. Now,
I think, wait a minute. Who did you learn discovered America?
Christopher Columbus.
Yeah, well, Christopher Columbus discovered something that had been discovered between 20,000 and 10,000 years before he got here. What everybody who's watching this needs to do, I don't care what color your skin is, I care, but that's immaterial right now. That is irrelevant right now. Go to a library or go to someplace. Don't go onto Amazon. Order the book. Please stay away from Amazon. They are part of the big problem in this country. Order the book, the Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization. Have you read it? Because if you haven't, if you haven't read it, you've got to get it, because it will tell you. If you don't learn anything else here tonight, learn this. 4,000 years before the birth of Jesus Christ, Egyptians in the Nile Valley, and Egypt is a country in Africa.
Hold up. Did you say before Jesus Christ?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
4,000 years before the birth of Jesus Christ, Egyptians in the Nile Valley, and Egypt is a country in Africa. It isn't in the Middle East. We've moved it into the Middle East so that we don't have to admit that all those wonderful things we got from the Egyptians came to us from people of color. They were using metal instruments to do cataract surgery 4,000 years before the birth of Jesus Christ. That's over 6,000 years ago. Did you ever learn that in school?
No.
And if you didn't learn that, why didn't you learn that in school? Do you know how many things we got from the Egyptians, who were people of color, that we are proud to talk about today? The number of things that we got from people of color, it's just absolutely amazing. And why we allowed all of us to be ignorant about those contributions to civilization, there's only one reason for that, and that is to perpetuate the lie of the rightness of whiteness. There is not one white person on the face of the earth who is without people without DNA from a country in Africa in their DNA. I argued with a young woman from Japan about that 2 years ago at my daughter's house, and she said, we didn't come from sapiens. We aren't sapiens. We are Peking. We came from Peking man. I said, no, you didn't. But here, I'm not going to argue with you about it anymore. Go home, get your DNA done, trace it back as far as you can trace it, and then let me know what you find out. She sent me a letter 2 weeks later and said, you were right. I found out that my family, my ancestors were some of the first Afro-Japanese people in this country. I said, thank you very much. She should have learned that in school. It should have been all right for her to have African in her DNA before I said it. I talked to a couple of young women of the melanaceous variety a couple of years ago, and they said, in the future, when we have to write our race in a form that we have to fill out, we're going to put human. I said, that's a good idea. What are you going to put when that says color, skin color? One of them said, I'm going to put mocha. The other said, I'm putting chocolate. I said, thank you very much. Thank you very, very much, because that comes a whole lot closer to the truth than black does. But I know that people who are black, who consider themselves black right now, are offended by my saying there's no such thing as a black person. There's no such thing as a black person or a white person. People do not come in those colors. If you want to know what it's like to be white, really white, Google Tanzania and look at what happens to people who are without melanin in their systems in Tanzania. The witch doctors tell the locals to cut a piece off those albinos, and then you'll get some of their magic. That's what it's like if you are an albino in Tanzania. There are very few albinos in the United States of America, and even some of them have some melanin in their skin, their hair, or their eyes. It's time to get over this nonsense, and it's time to get over it now.
When you realize that there is more to know about the world that we live in, it becomes on you to do something about it. Everybody, Jane Elliott decided to do something about it. She didn't turn away from the phenomenal truths that she discovered about human history. She walked toward it, she made a difference, and she continues to live in that light. So I ask that you get someone else into the building. Stay tuned for the second half of this conversation, because it's going to get deep. Everybody will be right back after this brief message. America's Next Motivator, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern. America's Next Motivator, hosted by me, Cedric Riley, sponsored by the Pride Empowerment Network and our viewership. And we're back. Hey, Jane, are you fired up or not?
I'm just normal. I'm
Okay.
always angry about this situation because I have talked about it for 53 years, and most of the people I know who are of a different color have lived with it and had to fight it for longer than
Yeah,
I have.
that's
And
right. Let's
I'm
talk about
angry that we should have gotten over this a long time ago. This is ridiculous.
it means a lot to hear you say that you are upset and or angry at our lack of understanding when it comes to race, color, and those constructs in America, because it seems like uh, a lot of people who look like me have almost like a natural frustration, just automatically upset at what they see happening in the world. And there's not always a nice and neat explanation as to why you're upset. But I think you said it plain when you talked about the actual positive attributes that come out of the Egyptian civilization, the people that gave birth to all of the other civilizations, and how we don't really learn that. And it feels like the natural order of things is turned upside down. And I mean, what I mean by that is, if you just learn what's given to you, you could be pushed into believing that that white people are the biggest, the best, the tallest, the strongest, the fastest, the smartest, and the richest, and that the quote unquote black people are the complete opposite. And there are people who live life that way. I think frustration comes from that, but more so when we realize how black civilization gave birth to all the other civilizations. It seems like that idea should be the other way around. That the humanity evolved forward as opposed to it looking like it evolved backward. Am I making sense?
Yeah, we've got to give up words like Caucasian.
Yeah.
If people had originated in the Caucasus Mountain region, they couldn't have lived through the first winter. It's time to get over that. We've got to stop calling ourselves names that make no sense, like white and black. We've got to start referring to members of the human race, not several different races. There's only one race. Unless, and of course, we have that foolish woman in the House of Representatives, or is she in the Senate? I can't remember where she is. All I remember is every time I see her face, I want to no, we can't talk about that. But she is saying the most ignorant things about the fires in California were started from somebody in a spaceship. We didn't come in a spaceship. People, human beings, didn't arrive here from another planet. We all started from this planet, and we're all members of the same race, which started out very, very dark skinned, because the people who originated, who were evolved first, had very dark skin because they were in Africa and they're exposed to a great amount of sunlight, so their bodies produced a less melanin to protect their cells from the damaging rays of the sun. That's what this whole thing is about.
That's right.
Is people who moved, who faded as they moved farther and farther from the equator. Those who got into the darker climes had to work hard to make a living, had to work hard to live through the winter, had to do things that you didn't have to do if you were in Africa. Life was easier in Africa because I took my third graders one year through a little exercise to find out what the first people on Earth probably looked like.
Yeah.
And we talked about, well, what would you have to have? Well, you'd have to have a place to live. Well, then you couldn't live where it was really cold. You couldn't. The first people then didn't come from Northeast Iowa. No. Well, what would you have to do about food? Well, it'd have to be something you could pick off the trees or out of the ground. They wouldn't have known how to grow it. Well, then it'd have to be a really warm climate, wouldn't it? Yeah, and you'd have to have, where would you find water? Well, you'd watch the animals, and they'd show where to go to water. Well, and we went through the whole thing, and finally, I'll never forget, Debbie Knapp, I said, and the sun would be, you'd be exposed to a lot of sunlight, so you'd have to have something, you didn't have clothes to wear, so your body would have to protect yourselves from the rays of the sun, wouldn't it? So what would that tell you? And little Debbie Nat sitting there went, he was black. I said, what did you say, Debbie? He was black. Who was black? The first man, Mrs. Elliott, the first man was black. I said, Debbie, I believe you're right. She said, I can't wait to go home and tell my dad that the first man on earth was black. And I thought, oh Lord, her father is on the school board. I'm going to lose my job. Yeah. I don't know whether she went home and told her father that, but she came to a conclusion that just made sense. We would not be here if we had originated in Northeast Iowa. We wouldn't
That's
have
right.
lived through the first winter. We have
That's right.
to look at the reality and deal with reality, and then accept the fact that 4,000 years before any of us were even thought of, Egyptians were preparing this world for people who look like you and me, because they knew by then that people were fading, that those Egyptians were lighter skinned than those from the farther southward. That's just the way it was. That's just the way it is. We've got to get accustomed to thinking about reality instead of thinking about this fantasy that we have built about the rightness of whiteness. It's time to get over it. We have
That's right.
all kinds of proof that it's a lie.
That's right. We have comments coming into the building. Starlet Cunningham says Victoria Falls shouldn't be named after Queen Victoria. It had a name, the smoke that thunders, that was given by the people who saw it first, Africans. And it goes right along with what you're saying. Stephen Cleary says powerful stuff. And, you know, Starlet Cunningham also says, will more people listen if Jane was a white man? Know, we are in a very important moment in the show right now. We are getting ready to dismantle something that has had a stronghold on us as a people for over 200 years. Is race a social construct? Is race something that we need to do away with? Yes or no?
It's an anti-social construct. It's not just a social construct, it's an anti-social construct. It's a bad idea that came out of the Spanish Inquisition. If you're going to continue to use the words white and black that were used during the Spanish Inquisition, and you need to know that the word race, meaning a separate group of people, came out of France in 1580. Look it up. Look up the etymology of the word race in the dictionary, and you'll find out that that came out of France in 1580. Now, that's how short this lifespan has been of the idea of different races. We need to get rid of that word, and we need to, if you're going to continue to use the words, the vocabulary of the 14th and 15th century, then you must use the means of transportation and communication that they used during the 14th and 15th century. And I'll go outside and I'll watch the horizon for smoke signals rising to tell me how much you hate me. Fine, let's do that. All you men will now wear knee breeches and powdered wigs, and you women will wear corsets so tight that you can't breathe. You won't be running up and down stairs because you won't be able to do it because of your lack of oxygen. People, give up the ideas that rose in the 14th and 15th century and come into the 21st century. If you aren't going to do that, then you'll never have to watch something like this program again, because you're going to give up electricity. You're going to give up all the things that we have now that they didn't have then. I suspect that nobody wants to do that. If we said to you, you can't have electricity if you're going to have racism, I'll bet you, and so that we could be truly enlightened, we would vote to keep electricity.
You know, when we do away with race, it allows us to do away with hatred. It allows us then to do away with certain levels of violence, confrontation.
No, it doesn't. No. Race doesn't cause hatred. Hatred causes race, but there are lots of things that I hate. And it isn't because of race. I hate ugliness. I hate discrimination based on skin color. If we would still have hate if we do away with race, but we need to do away with the idea of race so that more people would have fewer reasons to hate others. We could stop miseducating people if we would start educating them. But right now we are miseducating people. We need to start educating people. There are still states in the United States where they have laws against miscegenation. Now, you can't have reproduction between two members of two different races if there's only one race. This is only one of the things that we could get rid of. Do you realize that within 30 years, melanated people who look like me, will be a numerical minority in the United States of America, as we are worldwide. Worldwide, only from 15 to 18% of the population of the earth is registered or as classified as white. 15 to 18% of the population of the earth is classified as white. So what in the name of heaven makes us think that we should rule the world?
Right. That's right. We believe when I say we, I'm talking about the masses who've been indoctrinated that, like you said, white is right. But in reality, those of us who are melanated are pulling new creations out of the ethers of our mind every day. We create the things that allow humanity to move into the future. And when we embrace melanin, when we embrace our mind space, then I think we equip ourselves with the consciousness to actually survive here on Earth. What do you think about that?
I think that if people would read Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, that they would be horribly regretful of the skill, the talent, the abilities, the intelligence of people of color that we have accused of not having any of the above. If we had been taking advantage of all that intelligence all these years, can you imagine where we would be today if we had allowed little children who are of different colors to be treated as fairly as the little children who are colorless are? Can you imagine if we're talking, you want to talk about drama, you want to talk about music, you want to talk about athletics, you want to talk about history, you want to talk about brilliance. But yeah, we have missed such huge amounts of those things, those skills, talents, and abilities, simply by forcing people to believe in the myth of the rightness of whiteness. My good God. Just think about that. Good God. Let's think about Jesus. According to the Bible, Jesus had feet of bronze and kinky woolly hair. You find me, except in a black church, a Jesus that looks like that. That won't happen because one of the major differences between melanated people and melanemic people is when melanemic people come into a new environment, they immediately adjust the environment to fit their needs. When melanaceous people come into a new environment, they immediately adjust their needs to fit the environment. We melanemic people have done that even with the word of what we call God. We have changed that word to make it something that we can live with. We have changed the picture of Jesus to make him something that we can pray to. Think about how ignorant that is. Yeah. Think about how self-defeating that is. Think about how foolish that is. Think about what we're learning in Sunday school. Think about sitting in a church, and I sang in the church choir for years, but think about how foolish it was for me to sit there and look at the minister while he read out of that book with a picture of Jesus behind him that looked like my grandfather must have looked. That isn't what Jesus looked like. And now biblical scholars are telling us that he was an Ethiopian Jew. That's Have right. you seen people from Ethiopia recently? You'll find darn few of them my color.
That's right.
It's time for us to stop rearranging the environment to fit our needs.
That's right.
And start rearranging our needs to fit the environment. It's time to start telling the truth.
That's right. It is a universal reality that the blackness of space correlates to the blackness that is melanin that we possess. We have to embrace that melanin, or else we are looking at our own extinction. Starla Cunningham made the connection a few minutes ago between capitalism in America, the domination of, let's say, white people, and the conspiracy, if you will, to keep black people in understatement. And so that is the paradigm that we live in today. As long as white people are the best thing that's ever happened, and the white people and capitalism are connected, and they conspire to ensure that black people are less than and an understatement, then we're going to continue to produce poisons, because you're missing diversity when it comes to your thought processes. So when you look at education, our education is poisonous and corrupted. When you look at some of our medicines are poisonous and corrupted. When you look at our agriculture today, a lot of it is poisonous and corrupted. And because that is a lack of diversity. Now, on the other side of this, when we shift the paradigm to its appropriate position, which is understanding the value of the melanin that we possess, then we begin to produce fruits. We produce fruits in our educational system. We produce fruits in our medical system. We produce fruits for ourselves and the world at large. That's how we need to shift the paradigm today. What is your take on that?
Well, you're right, except that we don't have to shift any of those. What we have to do is lower our level of ignorance and raise our level of education. We have to educate our educators. And we have to educate our lawyers and the people who are writing the laws. If you haven't read the book, The Color of Law, for God's sake, get that book and read it. If you don't want to read the whole thing, just read pages 217 and 218. You cannot, after you read that, deny that we haven't been horribly misled and thoroughly uneducated. The worst thing that can happen to a child is to know more than the teacher does. And most students of color know more than their teachers do. And this fall, there will be thousands of melanemic teachers stand up in the front of a class of diverse students and say, when I see people, I don't see people as black or brown or red or yellow. I just see people as people. You've
That's
heard
right.
that before, haven't you? Now,
Yeah.
some bright kid is going to stand up and say, hey, do you see white people? And she's going to kick that kid out of the room and maybe out of the school, because
That's right.
the thing you aren't to do is to tell the truth. When somebody says to me, walks up to me, some white woman that has a white melanemic person walks up to me and says, I'm colorblind, I don't see color. I'm supposed to say, oh, that's wonderful, but I don't. I say, I knew that before you said it. Because if you weren't colorblind, you wouldn't wear that shirt with those pants, and you wouldn't have your hair that color. And she says, you don't understand me. You don't know what I'm saying. I say, oh, yes, I do. I understand you perfectly. You're saying that you can't relate to someone whose skin color is different from your own. So you pretend that it isn't there. How dare you? How dare you pretend that you don't see the largest inch for inch organ on my body, which is my skin? The largest organ on your body, inch for inch, is your skin. And for somebody to say, I don't see you black, has anybody ever said that to you? Because if you haven't, you've been very fortunate. Because the first time somebody says, I don't see people as black, I say, have you lied very often or just today? Is that the first lie you've told today? Because if they didn't see you black, if they didn't see you black, they wouldn't say black. They'd say, when I see you, I don't see you green. And you could say, you're right, you don't, by George. At least you're not colorblind. People, we have to watch our language. Go to my website. And a woman named Judith Katz gave me permission to put the typical statements, and these are typical statements made by white folks that think they aren't racist. First is a set of typical statements. For instance, other ethnic groups had to struggle. Why is it so different for the blacks? How many times has somebody said to you, well, my people came here as immigrants and they had to struggle. Why is it so different from you? The only answer to that is you are showing a deep ignorance of the special deprivation suffered by black people at the hands of whites. You need to have that clarification in your head so that you could put it out of your mind and put it into that person's ears so that they will never make that statement again. Go through these typical statements and the clarifications, and then now somebody's saying, well, you gave us a lot of problems, you didn't bring us any solutions. Download the Commitments to Combat Racism. There are 18 things that you can do in your own environment to deal with your own racism. Now somebody's thinking, well, this is a societal problem. Societies are made up of individuals. If individuals will change their behaviors, we can change this society. That's the only thing that has ever done it. One person can make a difference. Donosaurus T. Rump is one person, and he has made and continues to make a negative difference in this country. One person can make a difference. Every one of you, each of you is one person, and you can make a difference. You can, for instance, have I reevaluated my use of terms, phrases, or behaviors that may be perceived by others as degrading or hurtful? If you are saying things like, I don't see you black, you don't have the right to say, you didn't understand what I said. You need to know that it doesn't matter what you meant by what you said. What matters is how it is perceived. Perception is everything. And if what you are saying can be perceived as racist, you need to change your vocabulary. And I'm sure you have enough words to change your vocabulary. After you go through those printed materials, then go to the bibliography and read every book on the bibliography listed under racism. And now you're thinking, well, what about us? We are members of the LGBTQ. Yeah, and some of you are members of color of those groups. And you know that. And I've met lots of people of color who were gay or lesbian and who had double indemnity, because not only were they gay and lesbian, they were black. So they had two things to fight against the ignorance of how we think people should behave and how we're quite certain they should look. Change your vocabulary. Realize that what you're saying, and most of what I'm saying, is going to cause anger in some of you, because white people don't want to give up whiteness, and a whole lot of black people don't want to give up blackness. And people will say to me, well, I'm proud of my black. You can't be proud of something you aren't, and you aren't black. I'm proud of my white ancestors. You didn't have any. Get over it, people. You are either you're shades of brown, and every one of you should get a copy of the Pantone color wheel. All these pictures came off the Pantone color wheel, and the colors of all these pictures are found on the Pantone color wheel. Get a copy of the Pantone color wheel, have it, take it down, have it laminated, and hang it on the wall. And then have children go up and put their hands, the palm of their hands, against that color wheel until they find a color that matches the skin on the back of their hand, and let them use that for their color from now on. And then go to the thesaurus and look up synonyms for brown. There are about 100 synonyms for brown, and most of you will find a synonym for brown that matches the color of your skin. People, I challenge you to stop thinking and talking and working and acting like you live in the 14th and 15th century. You don't. You live in the 21st century, and we must not allow anybody to take us back to the good old days, as Ronald Reagan said, the 50s. The 50s were great for white males. They weren't worth a damn for the rest of us.
That's
so
right.
don't go backward, people. Go forward just as soon as you can. Give up the ugly past. Learn from the past to construct a better present, to make the future better for all of us.
In terms of what we know, we have to normalize knowing that our melanated mothers are some of the most powerful entities on planet Earth. They've given birth to all of us. We have to move away from thinking that a white male patriarchy is providing the proper education for us. And when we embrace that from which we truly come, then we can actually move into the future. It's a matter of consciousness. We can't have consciousness without embracing the melanin that we possess as human beings. And so when you talk about eliminating the political terms of black people and white people, because those are political terms, then we get down to accountability for the melanin that's in space, the melanin that's in the food that we eat, and the melanin that's in our bodies, the melanin that's in our organs. It's not about race. It's about universal law. It's about life itself and how life itself is carried by the melanin molecule. Life itself is carried by the melanin molecule. And if we continue to ignore that, and that's what ignorance is in this conversation. When we ignore that life energy is carried by the melanin molecule, then we poison ourselves through our behaviors and through the things that we put in our minds and our bodies. And so be reminded tonight, everybody, that we are embracing one another. We are embracing the life that we possess and the ability for us to unify. We are embracing our ability to unify. We don't unify through race or I'm black and you're white. We unify through the reality that melanin is the carrier of life. And so we have a comment in the building.
There's one thing we have to remember. I have to get this in here. Victor Hugo said, "No power on earth can stop a man with a dream or an idea whose time has come."
That's right.
We killed Martin Luther King Jr. because if he and Malcolm X had gotten together, they would have upset this thing. Things would have changed drastically. They didn't get together. We killed both of them so that couldn't happen. The idea of one race is an idea whose time has come, and no power on earth is going to be able to stop it, because we have proof all around us that we are all members of the same race. And melanated people, you need to know that if we don't do something about the darkening of our skin, when that hole in the ozone layer gets larger and larger, you melanated people are going to be struggling to find someone melanaceous or melanotic with whom to have children, so that your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, and your great-great-grandchildren can survive. This is about the survival of the species. Make no mistake about that. This is about human survival. Get your heads out of the wrong end and start thinking.
That's right. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Jane Elliott. She mentioned Malcolm and Martin. I'm going to let you all know right here tonight that Cedric Riley is carrying the mantle, the torch of the understanding of what it means for us to embrace our humanity, to unify, and to systematically teach our people the proper paradigm when it comes to embracing melanin to unify humanity. That's who I am. And that's why I appreciate you for coming on our show tonight. Sometimes people won't digest it unless it comes from someone who looks like them or who's on the opposite side of the fence from them. And so we've appreciated you tonight. I got 3 questions that I need you to answer, and we've only got 20 seconds left in the show, Jane.
Yeah,
Star Cunningham. Star Cunningham is in the building. She's a health tech entrepreneur. She's a Black woman as well. She's a powerful American woman. She says, you got to come back, Jane. Now, I got 3 questions for you. My first, what is survival to you?
Survival is not being killed by the people in Uniontown. And my survival is, hey, my survival isn't important. The survival of the
No, your survival is important.
No. Let me get this perfectly clear to you.
Go ahead.
The idea of one race is important. The survival of that idea is all I care about. I could die tomorrow. Somebody could shoot me tomorrow. I've gotten threatened lots of times. If I did, I would be with my son and my husband.
That's right.
And I would like to be with my son and my husband. What is success to you? Surviving.
What is greatness to you?
Oh, greatness is relevance. If what I'm doing is relevant, then that's great. That's all I need to be is relevant. So don't ask me about success and survival. Ask me about survival, success, and relevance. I don't want to be irrelevant. I think I'm not.
Jane Elliott, you are extremely relevant tonight. The way that you synthesized idea is making the world a much better place. I listened to your story today. Our families listened to your story today, and we are giving you your respect today while you're here with us. And we're giving you your crown today while you're here to receive it. Ladies and gentlemen, put your crown emojis into the chat. Ladies and gentlemen, put your crown emojis into the chat. We are letting you know, Jane Elliott, that we saw you when you did that brown eye, blue eye experiment. We saw you stand up on many of public stages and fix the paradigm of humanity to benefit us all. We are giving you your crown today. We are letting you know, letting the world know that you, Jane Elliott, you are America's next motivator.
Okay, but stop referring to what I do as an experiment. Because if what I do is an experiment, then what we have been, when I create a microcosm of society in any room, then what we have been doing in this society for the last 250 years is an experiment. It is illegal and unethical to experiment with people without their knowledge or without their permission. If what I do is an experiment, we have been experimenting with people in this country for over 200 years. We have to stop it. What I do is an experience. It's an educational experience, not an experiment. What we're doing nationwide is not for the purpose of education. It is for the purpose of keeping one group on top and the other group down. That's
right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for stopping by today. All right.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Share this episode. Use this episode. Each and every time you tune into America's Next Motivator, there's going to be something here for you. All you got to do is stop by and pick it up.